We would much rather sit around and strategize and talk about a KPI and talk about what new self-care am I going to put in. But the reality is humans are wired for connection. People identify with like their personality, right? Like I'm an overachiever and I'm like, don't do that. Because you're like programming that overfunctioning into your personality. If you are feeling like you're going to go stare at a wall for several hours and dissociate, then we want like a yell from lower because we want to pull you into that root and get that nervous, like what needs to come up. If you're feeling like you want to scream and you want to like go hit something, heavy weights is also a really good one. Picking up and like just squatting. As high performing women, we just want to make it better. But when you do that, you lose capacity to have like the vision of like what actually needs to happen.
Welcome to the Trailblazers, the space where high-achieving women finally exhale and feel deeply understood.
We are Brittany Anderson and Disha Solanki, two leaders who have built, scaled, exited, and supported multi-8 and 9-figure companies,
while carrying far more than most people ever see.
Here we go where most conversations stop.
The burnout, the pressure, the ambition, the identity shifts, the invisible load, and the moments you almost quit.
This is where the real story begins.
Trailblazers. Welcome, Brittany. We are so excited to have you today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So should we just dive in? Disha and I feel so spoiled because we have had the great pleasure of getting to know you a little bit over the last few months in our Trailblazers community. And we were just saying before we hit record about how much value you bring to the women in the group. So, Brittany, can you just give us a little bit of background? Like, what got you into where you're at? You're a performance psychologist, you're a leadership strategist, you're incredible. So, talk about your journey.
Yes, thank you. So I'm a psychologist by trade who honestly really enjoys parties. I've never explained it this way before. So now I host retreats. And I'm like, that's how I got here is I really enjoy people. And I did a lot of therapy and I find a lot of value in connection. And so I started in a much more traditional role. Like my degree is in pediatric neuropsychology. So I thought I was gonna go work at hospitals. And yeah, until I didn't. And then I went and did that. And it was atrocious and such a wonderful role, but just not for me. And as I grew through that, I always say I got really healthy like halfway through my PhD, which was a real bummer if you've ever done like higher academia. And as I moved through that, I started like learning about the business and falling in love with like the process, but also meeting people. So, started in a private practice, a more traditional therapy venue, but I've always really leaned into whatever lights me up. And right now it is, as y'all know, and like I get so much out of our group, like I really genuinely, as much as a minute ago, I was like, I don't want to let people in. I love people, I love connection. And so that's really what's given birth to this most recent chapter.
How did you get from pediatrics to grown-ass high-performing women?
I'm gonna be so honest with you, they're way easier. I wish there could be like there was a moment and like my heart lit up. It's not true. They honestly, and this is like unfortunate, but they pay a lot better. Their schedules are easier and they're a lot easier because they can talk and they really like kind of like me. I enjoy talking. Kids, you have to listen a lot more specifically. They're more challenging than adults. So my life really kind of like demanded that. So
Yeah, and I think it's just interesting, and we can't help but bring it back to business in general. I think so many women, and we talked about this in one of the last Trailblazers community like group meetings, is how so many women are at this point in life right now today of major transition, of major change, of major pivot. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere in and amongst like the incredible women that we get to spend time with and hang out with. So, Brittany, tapping into your genius a little bit and thinking about how you bring women together and how you serve them and all these things, all your backing, is what do you think is the cause right now of so many successful women going, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm actually going to go over here and do this. So, what do you think these turning points, these pivots are? Where are they coming from?
oh my gosh, I think there's so much that plays into it to be I think it's really fun to romanticize it, and I enjoy doing that, like, the universe is working. I believed in that. I also think that we're resourced enough, and we're also kind of, like, tired of our own stuff. I mean, that's usually what brings someone in the door to work with me is, like, I now am sick of this, and I resourced enough financially, time-wise, like, most I'm kind of drowning in motherhood, but, like, not everyone is drowning in motherhood, and it takes resources to be able to realize you don't wanna do this anymore, and now I have enough data, like, I have enough of a pattern to show me I could do something different, whether it's building something different in the business or, like, whatever. But all of that to me, it takes cognitive resources to be able to do that. Like, your 20s and 30s are really not the time for that.
Mm. I mean, I think that's there's so much truth to that, and I think, I was just reading something the other day about a gal who had been she was actually in the financial services industry for years and years and years and years, and she kinda had this moment where she had this epiphany, and she's like, I had this vision of myself, and I saw myself teaching and not being in the weeds of it, and so I had to test, and I had to make sure, like, is that really what I'm called to? And now, like, that's fully what she does, is she stepped out of the industry, stepped out of herself, and is now serving at a totally different capacity. And I just think that, those big decisions come with, like you said, experience, time, wisdom, all of that. So it pivots me a little bit. A lot of successful women, I think all of us three ladies here in the room, maybe included, have a history of trying to be fiercely independent. I can figure it out. I can do all the things. I don't need help. I don't need support. Like, I'm so strong. Okay, not true. False on so many levels. False. So I'm curious, with your pivot to serving women on a one-to-one to more of this retreat style, talk
Mhm.
about what that's doing for women. Like, what value does it bring to not just keep it
Mm.
in maybe that one-to-one, but to really kind of expand and put yourself around other people that are maybe experiencing some of the same stuff as you?
Oh, I love that question. Oh my gosh. It makes them so uncomfortable in the best way. Right? Like, we would much rather sit around and strategize and talk about a KPI and talk about what new self-care am I going to put in, but keeping it in like this bubble. But the reality is that like humans are wired for connection. And so my sort of pipeline, right, is that you come in almost in a one-to-one model. You do the retreat where you are held in a container, kind of forcibly, but, like, by your own consent, with, like, 2 other women, so it really, like, exposes you just to a little bit, right? But in there, you're talking about some really heavy stuff, but it generalizes the experience that you have so much quicker because then on the other side, there's this community of women who've done this retreat, and they're living this, like, real time, so it scaffolds that skill set, and it helps to, like, from a nervous system perspective, it helps you to regulate real time, and it also keeps you accountable. But, I mean, you have to hear a language before you can learn how to speak it. So, we can sit around all day and be like, "I want healthier relationships," and, like, "I want a healthier business," but until you're exposed and pulled into that dynamic, and in my case, kind of held in it. Because the other thing the group does is they play together. That's what we meet about, and all of them are like, "I don't really wanna do that," and I'm like, "Show up with the Play-Doh, it's gonna be so good for you." With other women who are turning multiple 7 figures and blah, 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 whatever. But yeah, so it does a lot. I love that question.
Is there some self-sabotage involved when or is there a commonality of anything? And I didn't really want to name self-sabotage, but I think sometimes Brittany and I are quite guilty of this, is what I would say, because we can do all the things all the time, but are we the best placed people to do all the things? Probably not, if I was honest. And then do we carry the load for other people that maybe are not carrying their part in business or life or whatever it may be?
Mhm. Oh my gosh, 100, like, absolutely. Right, it's more comfortable that way, and it fuels this idea that typically comes somewhere out of childhood that that's your job, that's how you belong in a system, this is, like, who you are. I hear people identify with, like, their personality, right? Like, I'm an overachiever, and I'm like, "Ah, don't do that," because 'cause you're, like, programming that overfunctioning into your personality. And whatever you believe about yourself is you're gonna, like, seek patterns and behaviors to, like, reinforce that. But, I mean, absolutely, it's so easy to get stuck in that trap of self-sabotaging, absolutely.
So, along those lines, because I think DG, you bring up such a great point about this like internal self-sabotage where what's the saying? It's like it's not that you don't know the steps or what you need to do, it's that you choose to do something that is less significant. And I know for myself and being in and amongst, other really high achieving women, women that are driven, women that are they want result, they want impact, they want all the things. I want to talk about nervous systems. as it relates to that, okay? And I know, Brittany, that's one thing that you talk about pretty significantly is how do we regulate that? And I can't help but think that there's some sort of relation to that too. The person who's doing it all, who's in self-sabotage, who's flight or flight, like I hear that all the time. Even for myself, I've gone through in the last, couple years, let's call it, like where my body has been stuck in this fight or flight. And, there's symptoms of that and there's, repercussions of that if it's not dealt with. So for a woman that's maybe sitting there that's stuck in that high achieving, that's stuck in self-sabotage, that is stuck in fight or flight, even if you don't know that that's the term for it, but when I say it, you're kind of like, "Oh gosh, I think that's me." What are some things that they can do to regulate, maybe on their own?
Walking pads are my favorite. They're my absolute favorite. Typically, there's a lot of anxious energy that's being held in the body. So, and maybe I'll back up a step before that. If you could figure out what your body actually wants to do. Like, we spend so much time sitting, right? Typically, when we're moving and we get, like, a little bit anxious, there's either an energy of, like, I wanna scream, and I'm like, "Ooh," like, it feels explosive, or that, like, I just can't stop moving, I can't stop thinking, and that would be more of, like, a flight response. And so, my work watered down is that we're just completing stress responses. And so, literally, like, nervous system dysregulation, it's dysregulated because it's meant to respond to the environment and the stimuli. So if you can even just identify, like, do you wanna go scream and like, oh, are you feeling flatlined, like you wanna stare at a wall for 3 hours, or do you wanna move a whole lot? Well, then if you wanna move and you wanna, like, then go get on a walking pad. Ideally, go walk barefoot on concrete or, like, grass, but, like, that's never anyone's favorite, and they tell me that I'm wild. So, like, we can do a walking pad is a big one. If you're feeling flatlined and you wanna stare at a wall, then I want you to go, like, primal scream, meaning, like, not a lot of times we scream out of our chest, especially as women, or even use, like, a head voice, and so it lives up here. But if you are feeling like you're gonna go stare at a wall for several hours and dissociate, or sit in front of your computer and not actually get anything done, then we want, like, a yell from lower because we wanna pull you into that root and get that nervous, like, what needs to come up. And so a yell from, like, deep in your belly is really good for that. And then if you're feeling like you wanna scream and you wanna, like, go hit something, heavy weights is also a really good one. Like, much heavier than your no, don't hurt yourself. But, like, picking up and, like, just squatting, right? Something really heavy is a good way to pull you back into your body.
I love all those tips. And, I think outside of the obvious benefits from like a workout or movement or all of that, I can think of times in my own life where I'm like, I just need to go lift weights. I don't know why. It's not like I'm a bodybuilder. It's not like that's something that is, inherently ingrained in me, but it's like you just know, like something, you need some sort of release, and doing it the healthy way, I think, is important. So, Brittany, the other thing that comes to my mind, and this actually stems from a comment you made, it was a few weeks ago in one of our Trailblazer sessions. And it was along the lines of, dealing with and showing up for conversations in your business. So, as a high achieving woman, is when you show up into a conversation, making sure that you, and I'm going to botch your words, that's why I want you to talk about this, but making sure you're not showing up carrying that other person's emotion, feelings, how they're showing up, how they're taking it. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think that's a big one for women in business, in whether it's joint ventures, collaborations, team conversations, whatever. I just think that's going to be really valuable.
Yeah, yeah, oh my gosh. So I have a framework called You, Me, We, and it's under so if you can experience or conceptualize the conversation as, like, everyone has their own energy, and let's give it a color, right? Well, you have your own energy, your own emotions, your own stuff around you. Hopefully, it stays over here, and this other person has their own stuff too. Well, typically, especially as if you're coming into a harder conversation, like, everything kind of like, it comes out, especially if we're not regulating it, especially if you're not conscious of, "This is gonna be a really hard conversation. Let me go walk 5 miles," whatever you need to do to, like, get it up and out. And so what happens is all of those colors, they mix and they get into each other's business when a healthy conversation is, person A is over here, person B is over here, and then there's a conversation of the we. That's your lane, right? That's what you wanna be attending to as a high performing woman, is what topic actually needs to be discussed. Well, we don't actually understand what that is if everyone is bleeding into it. And especially as high performing women, we just want to make it better. We're used to being the regulators for like the entire room. But when you do that, you lose capacity to have like the vision of like what actually needs to happen. You lose ability to hold your team accountable or even yourself accountable because everything is so muddied. It all turns brown instead. Does that make sense? Okay.
Definitely. Yes. Honestly, where my brain was going is the color assignment, like and Dee's probably gonna, like, laugh at this or whatever, but we're reading a or I read a book at her recommendation, and I'm gonna blank on the title, we'll have to make sure that we get it into the show notes, but talking about, like, that energy and, like, assigning colors to energies, and it's about self-awareness, it's awareness of others, and not letting yourself essentially get sucked into their color, let their color spread to you, and so, Brittany, as you're going through that, I'm like, "Wow, this is so," I guess, recency theory or whatever, relevant to some of the things that we've been talking about is, like, not letting others' energy, you know, siphon you out or take you out of who you are, which is something that I found myself, I've been in primarily a male dominant industry for many years. And that's kind of forced me into without, being able to identify it or assign it in a different way is like showing up in my masculine. And,
Mhm.
I've joked before, like I get home and I'm like, I don't want to tell anybody what to do. My kids think I'm bossy, but I don't wanna tell anybody what to do. I just wanna show up and have somebody be like, "Brittany, here's what's happening this evening, and all of this is planned out for you, and you don't have to make a damn decision from here on out." And so everything you just talked about, Brittany, I think, so many of us can relate to, and, it just hits home. So
And I think a lot of us leaders as women, I found, is we lead with empathy, which is also sometimes a difficult place to be because you literally feel the emotions of other humans. And you're talking about color systems. I think that when someone walks in a room, whether it be a Zoom room or physically, they bring some sort of energy with them. And you can almost feel it. It's like palpable, right? And then trying to dissipate the negative energy is really sometimes difficult because not just stepping outside of your comfort zone, you're feeling everything that your team feel at the same time. And I know that I find it energetically really draining. I find it really draining because that's not my normal default setting to. Because then you go into saving everyone, then you'll find someone who comes in really chirpy, and you're like, "Oh, you're such a great human being. How did you just wash away everything that's going on and just come in with that energy?" Like, it's so beautiful when people can do that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of my, like, more unpopular opinions is that being an empath, being, like, leading with that empathy is usually a trauma response, right? It's like an internal boundaries issue, and I
Yeah.
don't know anyone's life, but it really is it comes from a place of we didn't have practice as children being told, "Hey, it's not your responsibility to make sure that, like, mom and dad are okay. It's actually not your" like, but we've been groomed for that, and then you put us in a situation with a team, and like, those survival instincts, they just kick on because if we don't deal with it, then who's going to,
Mm.
right? But in reality, if we want them to, then we can't pick it up for them.
You know, I'm glad you just went there and talking about how, something like empathy is, in your opinion, a trauma response. And I just think back to my own. And I think women listening to this, it's like we just had this happen, Brittany, because of something you said, just this week on something about like certain things change at a certain age. And I think it was 11 years old or whatever. I think, is that what you said? I want to make sure I'm saying this
Something
right.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we were like in this deep conversation. It's like, you get to these different periods or points in life, and this is when something shifts and changes. And I think all of us can look back. And I want to say, this is my point, is that when you are doing the work on yourself and you are putting in that effort, I've seen it where women especially will be like, that's my past. Like, I don't need to go back there. It is what it is. Like, I'm fine. Like, and it's like, yeah, you're fine. But there's reasons that you behave and do and decision like why you make decisions a certain way.
Mhm.
And it's all based on what has happened in our lives. And it's okay to revisit that in order to make sense of something that's going on now and or coming up in the future. And so I'm just glad that you brought that up because I think for myself, Disha, our conversations, there is so much tied to maybe how we felt we had to show up in relation to, how we show up now and how we show up for people, and maybe lack boundaries on occasion. So that brings me to the topic of identity. And you talk about, I mean, it's right on your website, like identity level transformation. Like that is something that you are really exceptional at and helping people work through. So how do you like where the heck do you even start when you're looking at identity, matching ambition, matching like who you're supposed to be and who you're called to be and all these things. So just talk about identity, 'cause I think this is a really important topic for women of, high achieving success.
Oh my gosh, I could say so much. I love identity work, right? Because it's so I always look for the back door and I'm really big on y'all know this about me. I'm big on results. Like I don't think especially like the work, the hard work, like we don't have to live here. It doesn't have to take forever. And my goal for people is like, let's get in the nitty-gritty, roll up your sleeves, but then like go play, like go enjoy having more space. And the quickest way to do that is for high performing women to play in the mind. Because if I walk up to any of my clients, myself included, I have to pay for this. Like I always say, I have to pay for a container to remember that I have a body. Otherwise, I live up here. And so when I'm looking to like get results, I'm going to start up here if that is where someone's strength is. And it matters a lot to how most high performing women about how they are perceived and who people see them at. And that has started in childhood because there was expectation being put on them. You are a good girl. You're such a good girl. You are so helpful. All of that feeds into identity and what we believe about ourselves. And if I can leverage this idea and get that to drive a behavioral change, that's like short circuit into rewiring a nervous system. But if I sit here and I'm like, take a deep breath when you feel anxious, like 9 times out of 10, we're going to miss the opportunities versus if I give you something that you can tangibly see. And I mean, a lot of it is about returning. Like I always say, like, I want you to be as weird as you were in middle school, but like, I want you to really enjoy it this time. Like, really own it and love it because depending on how you showed up, like, that was the core of when your identity was built. And so the quicker we can go back into there, it just gives you a cognitive way to really sink in some of these behavioral shifts that we're looking to make that are going to expand capacity. I don't know if that made sense. I love identity.
No, no, it completely does, and honestly, Brittany, where my head went a little bit as you're talking about kind of how we're framed as children and the things that are said to us and how you're tapping into this. As a mom, all 3 of us on this call are moms, and many, many of our followers, our community members are mothers also. So what are things that we can do, maybe even specifically with our daughters, but our sons too, what are certain things that we can do now to maybe help them have less trauma as they get older than maybe what we did?
So, Brittany, I don't know if this helps. I was talking to, what does he do? The psychotherapist. And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm traumatizing my children. He went, no, everybody's traumatized. Like, you can't get away from it. He was like, you could try and be the most perfect human that child is going to find. There's going to be something about that human that grows that
Yes.
thing. So I was like, oh, that's a relief.
Yeah, truly. I think one of like the greatest things that you can hand a child is knowing like this too shall pass. We
Yeah.
don't have to be afraid of our feelings. Like I did a podcast recently where I talked about like it is our job as parents to like teach our children to suffer and to know that it's not gonna not like and I was like, don't like take that to an extreme. But to know that like their world is not gonna crumble and like my world is not going to crumble just because a feeling shows up. I also think allowing them to trust themselves. So my son is 2 years old or about to be 2, and all he wears is my daughter's dresses because he loves a good tutu. He like and that's what he sees. That's what big sister wears, right? And I totally had like a, "Oh gosh, like, but I bought dinosaurs. What do you mean?" Like, but like he like struts in a dress. He freaking loves it. Like loves it. Like check is so enchanted with his like reflection and shows his friends. So finding little ways to like foster. So a lot of times I ask myself, like, is safety involved? And if it is, then I step in as mom. Now I'm gonna step in. But if it's not, I'm probably gonna let you, like, be pretty wild. Like I always say, I'm raising, like, feral dirt babies. They truly like, they never match ever, but they freaking love their outfits. They're always barefoot and, like, in the dirt playing with, like, a twig somewhere, like, genuinely, and, like, in our group. They're like the literal dirt babies.
I love that so much. And, I think between what you just shared, Brittany, and Disha, what you said too about like the trauma, actually, one of our recent podcast guests, Janelle Berlin, she was on and she talked about like naming trauma. And she's like, there's so many people out there. They're like, I don't have trauma. Like, there's no trauma. And she's like, trauma in its simplest form is literally a moment in time where you did not feel in control. And she's like, "So, if you really boil that down, like, like, we all face those times." So, I think about all that we've talked about, Brittany, today, and, obviously, you're set to serve, we're set to serve the, high achieving woman, the woman who's had a lot of success in her business, et cetera, and so forth. So, part of your methodology is decoding pressure patterns. And I can't help but think, all these things we've talked about with fight or flight, with responses, with, hopefully not carrying trauma into the next, like we all have these pressure points. So can you just talk a little bit about what that means, maybe in relation to kind of what we've shared today?
Yeah, yeah. On finding the pressure points for I wanna make sure I'm understanding the question.
Yes. Yeah. Like, how do you identify the pressure points? And then what does that actually mean? Right. Like, what does that mean? Why is it
Mhm.
important? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, what I am doing is I am interacting with someone based on the template that they hand me, right? So when I always say, like, if you're going to work with me, like, we jump into bed very, very quickly, and I get a lot of history from you. And so that serves as a template. If one and one is two, and it really is whenever it comes to relationships, they're not as special and unique as we think they are. I'm looking for the missing one over here. So I am getting what was your role as a child? And chances are I can tell you if you're like knocking on my door, and that is hero. So then I'm looking to see like where is this impacting currently? Is it relationally? Is it emotionally? Is it nervous system wise? I'm tracking to see based on how you're presenting. And the way that I'm doing that is with emotional regression. So there are moments when like this little 5-year-old inside of us or this 15-year-old inside of us comes online and there's certain signs that show me that that's happening. That tells me that there's a pressure point. That tells me something here is not resolved from when I was 5 years old, and that's where we lean in. Because the thing is that I hold sort of this map in my head. I always say I have like a whiteboard in my brain. I know where the missing one is, but I've got to wait for the nervous system to tell me where to jump in and like when to jump in. So I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but really truly it is like the person is telling me when and where things are showing up, and then I'm just filling in the blanks.
Yeah. And, I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier is we kind of get sick of our own stuff, right? And sometimes we need somebody else to be able to identify those pressure points. So that's what I kept thinking, Brittany, as you were sharing is like, man, sometimes we just need somebody to help us get out of our own way. And, I think the moral of the story here in this whole conversation today and the work that you do, it's really about support. It's about support. It's about having people that show up for you because so often with high achieving women, we are showing up for everybody else, but who the heck is showing up for us? And so
Mhm.
that's a big calling for the trailblazers, our community. Brittany, I know that's why we're so aligned because in the work that you do, like it's pulling women together and being like, hey, I got you. Like we can solve this together. Like we can make progress and we can move forward and all of those great things. So before we ask the last question or two, Brittany, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, they want to reach out, they want to talk to you about how they can maybe come to one of your fun retreat parties or, start working with you in some capacity, how do they do that?
I always say Instagram is like my playground for better and for worse, where they're playing with like reels and stuff like that. So Brittany McGeehan PhD is where you can find me the most. Like my website's there, things like that. But I'm on Instagram quite a bit.
Awesome. So, Disha, before I ask like my big, huge question at the end, is there anything else that you think we missed that you want to ask?
I have one question, mainly because, Brittany, we've really got to know you, but actually, I don't think anyone needs to get to know you to realize what a safe person you are to be with. And one thing I wanted to add to Brittany's long list of things was it's also having that safe space to be you, is what I say. And I don't know if many women or have that space often, is what I say, because there's always an expectation to be something or someone that maybe isn't necessarily just you showing up as you today.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh my gosh, I think that's huge, right? Because ideally, you receive that as a child, and that's what lets
Mhm.
the nervous system to expand in the first place. Think like the toddler who's, like, freaking out. So, to get that corrective experience in adulthood is huge.
And you create that, Brittany. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I like to think I do a good job.
Oh, I love that. So, Brittany, to round this out, is there anything that we should have asked you that we did not?
Oh, I have never been asked that question. That might be, like, my favorite. Oh my gosh. I wasn't ready for it. Oh my gosh. I think, honestly, like, I wish more women were talking about the genuine cost of not doing the work, because most of us know why we should. Like, we see potential, but we have a really big, like, good enough kind of perspective, but, like, I'm making it, and this is my norm, and this is, like, what I'm used to, and so I think asking ourselves, what are we risking if we don't do this work, is a conversation that can be really uncomfortable, because there's so much genuinely that can come that have nothing to do with I won't get to, like, smell the roses and, like, feel the sun and all of that, because like, chronic health conditions play a role in this, and building a business that builds way too fast and then, like, has to be disassembled completely after I've crossed, like, 7 or 8 figures. But then also, like, how do you want your children to show up in the world, right? Like, that's the easiest way to not pass down trauma, quote, unquote, is to, like, continue to show up for yourself. And I think that talking about what the real genuine like, what are you actually paying for that ambition can be really uncomfortable for high performing women. We like to think we can handle it, and usually we can't.
I am so glad that you brought that to the forefront. And, it's really easy. Like when we're looking at, measurables for our business, it is really easy to make a decision as far as like, oh, yeah, I absolutely will invest in that. Absolutely will spend that money. Absolutely. Like, oh, that will lead to that XYZ. I can see that path. Let's go. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's a little bit harder to look at, what does it take to invest in me? And, what is the outcome or what could maybe be overcome or what could be made even better if I take that first step? So that was for not being prepared with that question, which I always love to ask it off the cuff. That was a beautiful answer. So, Brittany, thank you so very much for coming today, for sharing your wisdom. As always, we so appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank
yes,
you.
thank you so much.
If this episode supported you, share it with a woman you respect and want to lift up.
Join our free Trailblazers community, the space where high achieving women finally feel met.
You'll find the link in the show notes.
Until next time, keep moving forward, keep listening to yourself.
And remember, you deserve support too.